All right, Cecily, thanks very, very much. Now, yesterday, apartheid security police's brutal interrogation was further exposed during cross-examination of former apartheid-era police officer Paul Erasmus during the Ahmed Timol inquest into the High Court, which is in the High Court in Pretoria. Timol died while in police custody at the then notorious John Vorster Square in Johannesburg. That was 46 years ago. A 1972 inquest found that he had died in detention after jumping from the 10th floor of the John Vorster Square. To talk more about the inquest, we are joined from our Pretoria studio by Ahmed Timol's nephew, Imtiaz Cajee. Imtiaz, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. It's really a pleasure having you here.
Good morning, Leanne, and it's my pleasure to be in your studios.
Let's talk about the beginning. I mean, were you surprised by the revelations given by former apartheid security police Paul Erasmus on his work at the John Vorster Square then?
No, not really, Leanne. I mean, as somebody who's been doing research in this field for many, many years, we've been well aware of the atrocities committed not just by Paul Erasmus, but many, many other security branch officers. But I think listening to it, during the duration of the inquest, brings back very, very painful memories. We should not forget that Paul Erasmus was not directly involved in the arrest or detention of Uncle Ahmed, but the vivid details that he had described yesterday of dirty tricks campaigns that he had embarked on other political activists just sends a shudder through one's spine to try and understand how innocent people's lives were traumatized. I mean, the numerous names of activists that he mentioned, like Obed Bapela, Moses Mayekiso, Comrade Winnie Mandela, and not forgetting the Archbishop Desmond Tutu himself. And I think, South Africans need to be creating more space and more dialogues like this, where we can hear from people like Paul Erasmus, who want to make full confessions and who want to disclose their heinous crimes during the apartheid era.
How important do you believe that his testimony was to this entire inquest?
I think it's quite important, Leanne, because, he had empirically defined yesterday that there was collusion between the security police and the magistrates. They would actually conduct mock trials, specifically relating to the death of Dr. Neil Agate, who also died at the notorious John Vorster Square police station. So absolutely no doubt. I mean, collusion between security police officers, magistrates, that just confirms our view over the years that the inquests were all a farce and a cover-up, and they were protecting the atrocities of the security branch officers, and they acted with impunity.
When you go back to the TRC, I think it was in 1996, Timol's mother, of course, urging and saying the exact thing that is being heard out now in this inquest, pleading for this inquest to be reopened. None of the security officers involved were ever called before the TRC. Do you think this is the time? Is it going to happen now?
Look, absolutely. That was the perfect platform, for perpetrators to have come forward and to make full disclosures. But we're well aware that in the Timol matter, none of them were ever subpoenaed. I had in 2002 written to the National Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Bulelani Nuka, pleading with him to follow up with those police officers that were alive. And again, my pleas fell on deaf ears. But we've managed to establish that a number of them are still alive.
Yeah.
And as Judge Billy Motley has ruled, they have been subpoenaed, and we hope to see them testify hopefully next week sometime, Leanne.
I mean, when you talk about some of them are still alive, I mean, 3 of them are still alive, and they have stories. And I mean, I'm sure you're very, very hopeful that they will come through. Are there indications either way? Will they appear? Will they not appear? I mean, what are your instincts telling you, and what are you hearing?
Look, Leanne, I mean, Judge Billy Motley has ruled clearly that they've been subpoenaed.
Yeah.
And the investigation officer, Ben Nell, yesterday confirmed that the subpoenas were issued, and they've already got legal representatives. So we pray with the grace of the Almighty that they totally come clean next week, and make full confessions. But that's obviously something that we're waiting to hear.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think that'll be a big piece of the puzzle that will hopefully finally come out into the light. Yesterday, more information came out about other detainees who died in detention, and nobody has ever been held accountable for any of these deaths. I can imagine that this inquest has and certainly will in future open up a huge can of worms for many other stories to come through.
No, absolutely, Leanne. I mean, we've had, since the first sitting, we've had the brother of Matthew Mabelane, Lesh, who's been attending the inquest. And we should not forget that Matthew Mabelane also died at the notorious John Vorster Square police station in the mid-70s. And he, like many other families, are looking for answers and looking for closure. And I think South Africans should be afforded that opportunity, where dialogue is created, where perpetrators are given an opportunity to come forward, and government cannot abdicate its responsibility from ensuring that families who have lost loved ones find some form of closure. And in the end, the reality is that in many cases, people are not always seeking financial compensation. They simply want the truth and they want answers.
Yeah. It was quite revealing yesterday with Stephanie Kemp when she was talking, and she was saying that Timol was the 22nd person to die in detention since 1963 without a trial having started. And most, of course, were said to have gone the same way that your uncle had, and that was through committing suicide. So there are so many more unanswered questions and so many other cases that need to be looked into.
No, absolutely. We should not forget that Lux Martin Luli died in 1963.
Yeah.
To have been the first person to have died in police detention. And then a bit later, Suleiman Babla Saluji. And my uncle actually attended the funeral of Suleiman Babla Saluji, who died from the Grays building. And obviously Ahmed Timol was the 22nd, and many other political detainees continue to die in police detention. But I think the testimony yesterday, Leanne, of Stephanie Kemp just gives us an opportunity to understand the lives of so many unsung heroes and heroines of this particular country who've made the ultimate sacrifice. And Stephanie Kemp is just one of them who will never get recognized. And I think by the reopening of this inquest, we're giving an opportunity to many other activists to give them a platform to basically tell their story.
Yeah. You talk about yesterday. Who is expected to testify today in the seating today?
Look, Leanne, we have two witnesses that are expected to testify today. The first is Professor Ken Bofford from the University of Witwatersrand, who's also the trauma director at the Milpark Hospital in Johannesburg. He'll be testifying firstly this morning. And thereafter, Comrade Isu Pahad, a close friend of my late uncle, who was also in London at the time and who had given Uncle Ahmed his final instructions, before he returned to South Africa in 1970. So those are the two witnesses that are expected to testify today, Leanne.
Just on a final closing note, how's the family feeling? I mean, you obviously being speaking on behalf of the family, do you feel vindicated in any way with this and some of the stories that you're hearing coming out of this particular inquest?
No, absolutely, Leanne. There's been absolutely no doubt. The family has always believed. And as a young 5-year-old listening to my maternal grandmother and my grandfather, we had absolutely no doubt that my uncle was killed in police custody. But I think the family as a whole, we are all overwhelmed and eagerly looking forward to a particular day when we find some form of closure and we get some answers where we can restore the honor and dignity of our beloved uncle.
Well, Imtiaz, we wish you the best going forward for today, for next week, and for whatever the findings are that do come out of it. And thank you again very much for talking to us before this trial. It's, of course, in the Pretoria High Court, and this is a lot of interesting details coming out of this. And as you heard, I can imagine this is the first of many to come through, because so many others lost their lives and nothing has ever come of it, or a case has never ever been opened. So let's see what does come of it. That was Imtiaz Cajee, the nephew of Ahmed Timol. We're going to take a break here on the program, changing tack slightly, talking about environmental affairs. We've got the minister with us here on Morning Live, Edna Molewa. Do stay tuned for that conversation.